Hey there, welcome to episode 76 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at about 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 30th of July, 2024. Today we're going to be speaking about manual versus automatic. If you initially believe that I'm going to speak about automotive transmissions, you're close, but you probably come from an older time when there were such things as a manual transmission, standard transmission, in fact. This will apply much more to the use of artificial intelligence tools, though, but we can include some car talk as well. Wherever you found your audio program, this one in particular, hopefully you'll be able to find the episode description, which includes our show notes and our links. I only have one really relevant link for today, although all four are, of course, relevant. So I will begin by reading the summary directly, which you will find in those show notes. We'll go through the links as usual, and we'll get on with the episode for today. I will note that this is actually me. I'm doing my own voiceover work, and I am human. And I have created all of my bulleted show notes, not really a script so much as talking points, I suppose. Myself, I very rarely use AI for anything other than creating, on occasion, not very frequently, maybe less than once a month, cover art for the various audio programs I produce. So I've used it, but I don't so much. AI, that is. We'll see how that changes in time. But either way, let us begin with a summary of today's episode. Digital versus analog clocks, calculators versus slide rules, and up near the top of a very long list, generative AI, making things for us versus people making themselves. You can take that either way, I suppose. Why does any of this matter? The question is how much learning may have happened before adopting the labor-saving route. Labor? Is that a word? No. Well, let's check with ChatGPT perhaps. The links for today's episode, as usual, our homepage for our Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a public charity, by the way, a 501c3 public charity, a Nevada nonprofit corporation. Innovateforvegas.org, F-O-R, Innovate for Vegas, no spaces, dashes, dots, other such things, except for the one between Vegas and org, innovateforvegas.org. Our homepage was designed to satisfy the IRS, the Nevada Secretary of State, our fintech service providers, other vendors. It is not intended to be an attractive business card. We're not selling anything. Take it for what it is. It's an information resource. Eventually, it will improve. I've talked about this previously, that it has become lower in outside priority to some other projects we're working on, one of which I will mention. It's still important, but it's not at the top of the priority list for the moment. It's bothersome. It's considered technical debt or debt. Technical because it's a web page, I suppose. But it is one of those things that should be getting more attention than it has been. But that's true of everything. When everything is priority zero, nothing is. Our GitHub organization, github.com/innovateforvegas, same deal, no spaces, innovate for, F-O-R, Vegas. It's where we keep our project repositories. We're moving to a Agile for Volunteer model. So initiatives will have project repositories, component project repositories, in fact. So this is basically the existing organizational layout of the various repositories there, if you're curious and want to check any of those out. We're formalizing the Agile for Volunteers structure, workflow, project tools use within the GitHub framework, etc., etc. So you can check that out if you like. And speaking of projects, one of them, or initiatives, I should say, one of them is Project Act, which here project is used for a descriptive name. Project Act, the autonomous cohort transformation, github.com/project-act, technically a hyphen, Project Act, ACT, autonomous cohort tessellation or autonomous cohort transformation. Tessellation is the first initiative. The tessellation will be some tools and methods to enable and encourage connection, communication, and collaboration between various individual and groups of civic volunteers across the United States, perhaps beyond. A bottom-up approach to connecting people who want to work on these community elevation projects on which we are working, initiatives, really, so they can find each other without a central authority. So ideally, we'll be talking more about this as we start to hit some milestones, although we're not a software company, so we're not pressured by market forces, for better or worse. Initiatives, projects, user stories, and more. So our GitHub organization is going to fall into this sort of hierarchical breakdown of component projects fitting under an initiative with various workflow components that we'll talk about more. We've talked about it in previous episodes, but it's part of the overall process that I'm going to speak about today because it does play a role in facilitating human-human interaction to help potential collaborators identify what work is being done, who's working on what the overall goals are, and so on. This is not always completely visible when you're working with a artificial intelligence. It may or may not describe to you how it's arriving at the solution it gives you. And finally, in the link list, example of an AI interaction. This is an interesting article. It's not totally relevant to the leanings of today's presentation, but 77% of employees find that AI increases their workload. Exclamation point. I added the exclamation point. It's a Forbes article. It's been kind of making the rounds if you're, especially if you're in the YouTube programmer space, people talking about programming and coding and learning how to code and so on. Generative AI tools have sort of found a place in the coding world. I think I have linked to this before. I will insert a quick paraphrase of something that the Primogen has pointed out, that AI tools are great as tools if they are not replacing learning. And again, I'm paraphrasing. If you already know how to code, if you already know how to do something, so we can make it more general, if you already know how to do something, artificial intelligence tools can help you do it a little bit faster. It can correct some of your errors. It's essentially a glorified spell checker or what do you call it? Autofill. So it can kind of help you out. It can whisper in your ear. It can, in fact, from a compiling standpoint, it can find some of your errors for you sometimes. It can help you with some labor-saving generation of test code and so on. So it can be almost literally the aptly named Copilot feature that you may have heard of, or similar tools that are essentially watching what you type, filling in some things for you, sometimes getting in the way, and so on. If you don't know what you're doing, if these tools are doing work for you, they are not helping you. And you may find that either you need to figure out, what did this just do for me? Certainly true in the coding world. Or someone else may have to do that. By you saving work for yourself, you may actually be introducing work to others. So give the Forbes article a quick read. I'm not going to talk about that much today, but it is topical somewhat. But we're really going to be speaking today about things like intellectual curiosity. And so we shall begin exactly there. This is old school, but there is something to be said for learning how to understand something, to determine how a system works, how to break it, how to fix it, how to improve it. This is how things are invented. This is how improvements are made. How can we make this last longer? How can we make more things from the supply of raw materials we have. How can we be more efficient? How can we save money? How can we save energy? You can ask these questions when you understand how the thing works, and you can try to answer those questions when you understand, again, how to break it, fix it, improve it. And you really get that from, as the saying goes, rolling up your sleeves and hands-on, using it. And this applies to anything, not just software. In fact, historically, it is applied to everything but software. Then software came along. But, how do you make a better mousetrap? You build one, and then you build another one, and you see which one worked better, and then you improve on the better one, and so on. So hands-on, and hopefully no mouses are injured in the course of the experimentation. A story I've told before about digital clocks. When I was very young, I suggested to my parents that I didn't need to learn how to read a clock because I could just use a digital clock. I could just use a digital watch. I could look at the time. I could say it is 3:08. Not knowing how clocks work, you do not learn what it means to be early or late, how hours, minutes, seconds are related. You don't understand the visualization of a clock face. You might never be curious why is a 24-hour clock use 24 hours, but then 60 minutes and 60 seconds? Why base 60 and base 24? What's 12 a.m., 12 p.m., 1300, 1400? You can look at these numbers. You can look at numbers opaquely and not have any sense of what they're telling you. And then forget about looking at how a clock functions, how the springs and what are the what's the quartz doing in there, what is the fine movements, understanding how an analog clock works. And if you really want to get down into it, you can read or learn about complications. Those are the features, the many things that your watch could do by pulling out a stem or pushing on a button or who knows what else. So complications, analog clock faces, clock traditions, how time works. What does it mean to move the hour hand forward or back? There's a certain amount of awareness one gets when one understands how an analog clock functions, why it functions, what happens when it moves, what happens when it doesn't. Digital clock hides all that. It just gives you the output. You don't have to think about how an analog clock works, but you kind of do. And the first time you see, you will sometimes find a watch face, or sometimes a clock will show its internals. Maybe the clock face will be transparent, or maybe you look in the back, or maybe it's a artistic, creative work of art that shows the internal workings of a clock, the mechanisms, and so on. There's a certain amount of fascination that hopefully the casual user will come away with, or at least stick around with. You don't get any of these things with a digital clock. They're pretty boring when you think about it. And let's not even talk about smartwatches. That's a different problem. When something is interesting to you, you may want to learn all about it, just like clocks, whatever it is. And this is where the intellectual curiosity that you hopefully possess can evolve into a level of expertise that becomes apparent to the most casual observer. When someone knows how a system works, when you see someone who really knows what they're doing, it doesn't have to be software. It could be something as simple as cracking an egg. When someone cracks an egg with one hand and gets no eggshells in the mix, and they do it repeatedly, they've done it before. They may have experimented with ways of doing it so that they don't get eggshell fragments in their mixing bowl or wherever they're cracking that egg. They may know a lot of things about a lot of things, and they get this knowledge. They learn these talents. They gain this expertise by doing. Let's talk about Oreo cookies. Knowing, and so this is the transmission part. If you are a driver of cars, and if you have been for some time, you may know how a standard transmission works. A stick, driving stick, as they sometimes say, a manual transmission, and how to drive a car so equipped. This was at one time the difference between being able to use any vehicle in an emergency and not. Or as some people say, when you are driving a car with manual transmission, when you're driving stick, you are driving. When you're driving a car with an automatic transmission, you are going for a ride. The standard transmission is only less common nowadays, particularly with more electric and hybrid vehicles on the road that are moving to completely automatic and perhaps optimized, especially with hybrids, switching from an electric motor to a gasoline motor, depending on how the drivetrains are connected to the final drive of the wheels, can make automatic and optimized transmission switching and so on more important. So it may be an example losing applicability, but at the same time, it works as an example knowing more about a system than less. Knowing how a torque converter works, at least somewhat, as compared with a clutch and a shifter, and perhaps some notion of how a continuous transmission works, all make up a general functional understanding about a system you might be using daily. If you get in a car and you have no idea how it works, you will discover how inconvenient that can be when your car rebels, when it stops working, or in the case of some Tesla products, when it decides to work in unexpected ways. What does the Oreo cookie have to do with this? Well, I learned how to drive a standard transmission Toyota Corolla, I believe, while I was visiting my grandparents in Punta Gorda, Florida. I was 10 years old. I was driving the little red Toyota around the circle, Turtle Dove Circle, in fact, the street on which my grandparents lived, at the end of the street where the circle was. So the street came into the circle, went around the circle, then you could leave. A complete tiny little track to practice shifting, upshifting, downshifting, and so on. Over the years, as I chose proactively to obtain, purchase, lease, etc., vehicles with a standard transmission, so I might continue to drive stick, I would occasionally attempt to teach others. And describing how the clutch system is working to the uninitiated or the not curious can be a little bit of a challenge. What's happening when I'm pushing this clutch pedal in? I don't need to know, or maybe I should. So the engineer in me from early on, and we're talking in high school, I was a licensed driver for a year, maybe, and then imparting my knowledge gained 7 years prior, concerning the operation of the standard transmission. And so I came to the conclusion that the Oreo cookie is a fine example. If you imagine the drive shaft coming into the cookie through the center, piercing it perpendicular to the plane of the cookies. And if you imagine the differential gear on the other side of the cookies, so that the drive shaft is attached to the clutch or the cream filling of the Oreo cookie, and the final drive to the differentials is attached to the cookies, one cookie. Are you with me? So the drive shaft could be, the drive shaft, not coming in through the cookie. The drive shaft is going from the cookie to the differential. The clutch pedal is attached to the other cookie. Okay. Sorry, I had my mental image flipped around. So once again, Oreo cookie, your clutch pedal is attached to one of the cookies. The drive shaft that goes to the differential is attached to the clutch plate going through one of the cookies, and then the other cookie is the flywheel. Okay, so clutch plate, flywheel. So the drive shaft goes through the cookie. That is not the flywheel. That is operated by the clutch pedal. The drive shaft is attached to the cream filling, which is the clutch plate. Is that making sense now? When you push in your clutch pedal, the cookies separate. The cookies are always rotating at the same speed because one of the cookies is the flywheel of your engine. One of the cookies is the clutch plate, is the clutch, and the cream filling is the clutch disc. So the clutch or clutch plate pushes the clutch disc into the flywheel, forcing the flywheel and the cream filling, the clutch disc, to spin at the same rate. The drive shaft attached to the clutch disc through the clutch cookie goes to your differential, drives the wheels. So when you push the clutch pedal, the cookies are forced apart. Now the cream filling can spin at the speed of the wheels that are on the road, while the flywheel and the clutch are spinning at the same speed themselves. So the cream filling and the cookies can spin at different speeds. This way, you can change the gear ratios of the transmission. So the drivetrain may be going through a transmission, hopefully. So it goes through the transmission to the differential. So when you shift, you can match the speed of the spinning wheels that are touching the ground through the transmission drivetrain to the clutch plate. Okay? So once again, flywheel cookie, clutch plate cookie, spinning at the same speed, drivetrain cream filling, spinning at its speed through a transmission to the final differential and driving wheels that are touching the ground. So when you push the clutch plate in, the cream filling can spin at the speed of the wheels through the transmission. The cookies can spin at the speed of the engine, which you can adjust with your gas pedal. So when the engine RPMs, revolutions per minute, when the flywheel is spinning at the speed that you want the transmission, the clutch disc, to also be turning, you can adjust your accelerator to match closely the speed of the wheels that you want to achieve at the particular gear setting, the transmission selector, your gear shift or stick. When you do this correctly, you will multiply the torque, the output of the engine through the flywheel, going through the transmission to the final drive through the differential, by having the cream filling spin, turn, rotate at the same speed as the cookies. When you apply gas, when the discs are spinning at different speeds, you can try to match the speed of the engine to the speed of the rotational speed, the speed of the flywheel to the cream filling. That way your car doesn't jerk, it doesn't bog down the engine, you don't risk stalling. The joy, of course, of driving a standard transmission is coming from or moving from a full stop, getting out of first, as they say, or getting into first, I should say. So when you are stopped at a light, or when you've just started the engine and you're about to head off on your adventures, the clutch disc is spinning. I'm sorry, the clutch disc is not spinning. The flywheel and clutch plate are spinning. So you apply gas, apply force to the accelerator pedal, which spins the flywheel of the engine. First gear is often set with a torque multiplier so that the engine will be able to spin quickly and the wheels will spin slowly, so that you can get the car moving without stalling, hopefully, by applying the clutch plate to the clutch disc so it is pressed against the flywheel, so that the cookie part will spin and apply torque to the not moving clutch disc and make it start turning, but slowly through the transmission. Ideally, you will not be burning rubber. You could if you want, but the idea is to have the engine spinning quickly by applying gas, so that you don't stall the engine, that you apply torque to the clutch disc through the transmission to the wheels. The gear ratio is such that the wheels will begin spinning slowly. The car will begin to move. You won't be going very fast. You'll hear the engine rev up, and then you shift into second. Clutch in, cream filling, clutch disc can spin independently. Flywheel cookie with clutch plate cookie spinning as fast as the engine is. Try to match the speeds when you shift into second, so that the clutch disc through the transmission will be spinning at a particular rate. As you become familiar with your engine, you will know approximately what that is, and eventually you'll do a nice smooth shift from first to second to third and so on. And when you get really good, you won't even have to use the clutch, and you'll just know when the transmission is moving just at the right speed, so you can move the gear shifter between gears without having to worry about matching the speeds through the application of pressure on the clutch plate to separate the cookie from the cream filling. But you don't have to worry about that now. So there's no need to understand how all that works until you find yourself suddenly in need of an emergency vehicle that happens to use a standard transmission. Maybe you'll understand how they work at the last possible minute. As a Volkswagen owner, you always had to be ready to go, just in case something went awry with the clutch cable. Who knows what? All kinds of possibilities. Fun fact, by the way, if you have a low compression engine like classic Volkswagen Bugs, you could literally start the car in gear and you would just go. It took some practice, but without a clutch, you could still make it home through a combination of coming to a full stop, so kind of basically stalling the engine out at lights, and doing the equivalent of speed shifting without a clutch between gears, matching the engine rotation with the wheel rotation through the transmission gears. So all that said, building and fixing. You may never build your own car, but the mindset applies anywhere your creativity does. Are you cooking something new? Are you fixing a bicycle? Are you editing a video? There are any number of things, only more things in the modern day. If you know how systems work, how they fit together, it makes your effort to create something new, assemble some parts, or fix them that much easier. In the world of computers, building can be a real challenge, especially if it is some new thing. Novel means unknowns, but often novel need not mean unknown. I've built many computers in my personal and professional career. Once you build one computer, once you get over that little learning experience, and nowadays it's infinitely easier than it once was many years ago. You can build on previous knowledge and experience. Once you've built one computer, building your next computer is a very small change. Most things fit together as they did last time, so you're not learning much in the way of new things. You may switch processors. You may find that NVMe drives are a new thing. There was a time when that just didn't exist, when you had to use IDE connectors and not SATA and so on. So the technology's changed, but you can often apply what you've already learned in building your next computer. The same is true for so many things. In fact, if you learn how to learn, you can accumulate knowns so that when you encounter something that you don't already know, it doesn't remain unknown. It's just something you have to, so as we say, figure out. There may be some unknowns, but it doesn't need to be unknown. Building on previous knowledge and experience works, but jumping straight to the answer, not so much. So if somebody just gives you the answer and you never figure out how to get there, you may be missing out, especially next time if that person is not there. This is a recurring theme. Knowing how something is put together makes it that much easier to examine why it may not be functioning as expected. If you know nothing about how cars work and you hear a noise, you are not getting the acceleration you're hoping for, you may not quite understand what's happening, and you may be at a loss. You may be completely and totally dependent on a tow truck, a mechanic, a warranty service at a dealership, etc. Now, this is not an awful thing. Cars are only more complicated. But if you have no idea how a system is functioning, you are at the mercy of the tow truck, the warranty service, the mechanic, the parts dealer, etc., etc. So knowing how a system works, you don't need to know how to fix it, but you need to know how it works so that you understand what is being done to fix it. That seems like a fair minimum. If you depend on something, I need my car to get to work, you should know how it works. I know that's asking a lot. We're all busy. Knowing and exploring. So we have building and fixing and knowing and exploring. Many people, regardless of their particular skills or interests, can identify with this change. You know it. And which will someday be a lost difference. There will be a time when no one remembers. Even the people that do remember now may not remember. There was the before time and the after Google Maps. So before Google Maps and GPS. Now, Google Maps was not necessarily the first mapping service. I think MapQuest may have been first. But the notion of connecting a map to a mobile device with GPS, I think Google may have been first on that one. But either way, Google Maps sort of owns the branding crown, for better or worse. Having a GPS device in our pockets was unheard of. And by the way, there may have been a vehicular application TomTom, maybe, or Garmin. Certainly, Pocket GPS is not a brand new thing. They tended to be more expensive, kind of large, a limited memory, and so on. So having a connected device with GPS and the ability to connect all of that to a moving map with a user interface on a color screen, touchscreen, these were all nice evolutionary changes, improvements, adaptations to the casual user. So we're carrying these things around in our, before we were carrying these things around in our pockets, we might need to learn about a particular geographical area. And to do so, we might need to explore a bit. We may actually get a map, Thomas Guide, anyone, to determine which way is the best way, which ways are alternate ways. What happens if there's construction or traffic or other problems? I need to get to work. I need to get to school. I need to get to wherever. I should know a few different ways to go. If you ever lived in Phoenix, you know, oh, it's rush hour. Oh, it's morning, the reversible lane, which is a ridiculous idea. The reversible lane will be going north. Later, it'll be going south or vice versa. 7th Street, 7th Avenue, Central, which northern versus Glendale, all these different streets on the grid. If you're in the central or west areas where I spent most of my time in my youth and in my early driving days. So you would come to know the terrain on which you are depending so much by knowing, by exploring, by figuring out what works, what doesn't, what time of day. You may accidentally stumble upon a cool restaurant, a quaint bookstore, a different route, a shortcut, by exploring. Here's a little story for you. When I went to Ireland for my very first trip when I was an employee of Intel Corporation, got on a plane, flew to Dublin. My getting around Dublin was an adventure in itself. I did not have a SIM. This was when roaming was more of an issue than it now is. So I eventually got myself a 3 SIM for my phone. But the first couple of days, I was basically Wi-Fi only, and who knows how that would work. So wandering around Dublin on my first weekend, completely lost, had no idea where I was headed. Completely mistook some other thing for which direction to go to the river Liffey, and total chaos. So once I had a GPS and so on, it was helpful to get around. But guess what? It was actually interesting to wander around. You could always look at the map and see how to get back onto the main or the general correct direction. But wandering down side streets and so on, completely and totally off the path suggested by this automated tool. And this was 8 years ago. We've come a long way, according to the map. So after Google Maps, we no longer really need to know anything. We don't need to know exactly where things are in relation to each other, other than here is the route to get there. We don't really need to think about bus schedules, train schedules, traffic patterns. We don't need to know these things. We are told these things. How do I get from here to there? Well, I'll take this bus or call for a lift or take this route, get off on this exit. Hopefully don't turn onto this dead-end road and smash into a wall or drive into a body of water. Those things have happened over the years, but as things have improved, we now have completely lost the dependence on our own ability to determine where we are, where we're headed, and to discover things that we may find along the way. Making a mistake when you're wandering around a new city can often be not only educational, but maybe even fun. But if we depend completely on being told where to go from point to point, we're no longer wandering down wrong paths. We may not encounter new adventures. We always know how to get exactly where we want to go, as long as we have batteries and a signal. But what if we don't? So by way of examples, I will suggest that AI is bad. What? AI, as people believe it will be or should be used, is not necessarily great in the short term, in the near term. Clearly, the job market is changing as companies, employers, reduce human headcounts with AI replacements. Now, it's interesting to note, and I've talked about this previously on the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program, one of my other productions. 82% of business in America has no employees. Solo entrepreneur, solo consultancies, service providers. Maybe you're a general contractor and you sub out, you have subcontractors doing all of your work. So you technically have no employees. 82% of business. And if I'm not mistaken, this is all business. So, it's always easy to adjust numbers to make a point. 82% of businesses, I think, was the general notion. So if you're a Google or a one-person company, that's 2 businesses. So if you have 10 businesses, Google, Facebook, etc., Google and Facebook, 2 employ lots of people. The other 8 could be individuals with their own companies, and they have no employees. So taken as with 100, you could get 82 employing no people. When you are a solo entrepreneur, when you're an individual, when you have your own company and that's how you're functioning, how you're operating, maybe AI is one of your pseudo employees. Maybe it helps you get work done, but then we'll get to the AI good section next. So if we have, though, a generative AI tool create for us, whether we're working for a company or not, and again, if you look at that Forbes article, it doesn't always save you time, and employers will figure that out eventually. We may lose. I've mentioned this in various episodes. I occasionally am flipping through my notes and I'm like, did I type that? And unfortunately, I cannot blame the AI. We may lose the so-called muscle memory, the innate skill, the nascent expertise development. So we may be getting better and better by writing our own emails, by drawing our own pictures and so on. So we may miss out on those things that we otherwise relied on, and which grew. These things develop over time, the before times. Why explore when we can be taken to precisely where we want to or need to go? So in other words, you will not wander down the wrong paths. You will not find yourself trying some new ideas. You won't, if you want to use a cooking analogy, you will not be putting in too much or not enough of a particular thing accidentally. It will just happen and you will see the results. You may be shown the recipe, but you may not, depending on what it is. And so you may be inclined to accept what you're offered through whatever tools you're using. And from there, it's up to you to decide whether you use it as is or learn from it or some combination. Anything that your AI tools do for you, instead of you doing it, is likely to be opaque to you. So you may or may not know what's happening. You may just get the outcome. You can generate source code for a software project. You can generate a recipe, compose an email, write some ad copy, draw a picture for you, make a video for you, create a synthetic voice. If you are a consumer of YouTube, that's becoming an unfortunate commonality. How many videos are now completely bogus? You can always spot the generated video with the human-like voiceover mispronounces simple words consistently, or even better, mispronounces them inconsistently. Very telling. So, and not satisfying at all. You're not fooling anyone, but eventually that will change as well. Where are these outcomes from? Do you have any idea how these are functioning? Are you sitting in a car and you have no idea how it functions? Or are you peeling back the layers of the onion? Do you know how large language models, how generative AI, how any of these things work? Are you the least bit curious? Do you possess the intellectual curiosity to learn from these outcomes? Using the tools, are you learning with them, learning from them, or being replaced by them? So there's a difference between having the tool do the work, and so this is the AI for good part of my presentation. So having the tool do the work and using the tool to do that work. As Steve Jobs famously said of computers, they are the bicycles of the mind, the equivalent of an advantageous gear ratio to multiply inputs to outputs. So if you can think of a certain thing, and let's use some assistive technology, and we can actually talk about actual assistive technology. So let's look at live spell checking. So if you are if you're typing your great novel, you're working on your fourth version of your or your fourth, what is it, fourth book in a series or whatever it is, you have a pretty good idea how the story goes. You may have a timeline, you may have character profiles, you may have backstories, all kinds of stuff. And as you're typing along, you misspell words. So the spell checker can offer suggestions. You may come upon a block of text where you've used the same word 3 times. Where's my thesaurus? Oh, you can just look it up. So it's a tool that you can use. You are not incapable of doing these things, but rather than breaking your train of thought, losing your momentum, cognitive load change, the computer can help you. You have lost nothing in that transaction. Did you not know how to spell there? Did you choose the wrong one? By the way, that's one of the big failings of your basic spell checker without context. Sure, you spelled THERE correctly, but it should have been THEIR, but who knew that? Nowadays, a smarter AI-driven or AI-powered spell checker could look at the context and say, did you mean THEIR? THERE? So, no, I meant THEY''RE. So there's a time and a place to use these tools to benefit your own efforts to multiply your outputs, save you time, energy, etc., etc. Until there is actual general intelligence that can actually, and by the way, you could train, if you're on your 4th book, you could train a model on your previous 3 books and maybe it could generate a 4th book. Guess what? It would be literally statistically based on the previous 3 books. You inject that creativity, the hallucinations that matter, the little bit of insanity that you can sprinkle on top that makes the story unique to you. It makes your style. Now you could even have it generate bodies of text that resemble your writing style based on the 3 books, but it would not be based on the forthcoming 5th book. Maybe you're working on 4 and 5 together. Either way, whether the tool is doing the work for you or with you is the big question. So until there's an actual general intelligence, AGI as they call it, that can do these things, that can be creative, that can come up with stories with a writing style that matches the previous 3, but is based entirely on a notion, not on the word ordering, on the vectors, of the large language model. It is probably a great idea to always treat an AI interaction, any outputs of work done for you, to be treated as inputs to your own learning process. That is, take what you get from ChatGPT or Llama or Claude, or the list goes on. There's only more. And use those as the starting point for your own. You may say, write me a draft for this section where one of my characters first encounters a character that has not appeared in any of my other stories, but that character is a car mechanic, and our primary character has no idea how to drive a vehicle. So maybe the AI could come up with something, and you may say, no, that is not correct, no good. But it may say, you may say to yourself, but I can take exactly the opposite of what the AI said. See, the AI may not be able to do this, that your ChatGPT or similar tools may not be able to flip the narrative completely, but you may be inspired by its wrong moves, by its wandering down the wrong path. You may say, oh, that does sort of work as long as I switch it completely and move this around and change that. So the AI tool maybe did something that you may have done or something you may not have done. These are inputs to your own learning process or your creative process. If the tools are used as tools to leverage and learn, you will grow because of them. So again, as the Primogen said of using Copilot or similar tools when you're writing software, when you're coding, if you already know how to program, if you already understand the code base, if you're already collaborating with others, your Copilot tool might say, oh, this is a pretty standard routine, or, oh, let me look at your code. Let me generate some test code for this. Oh, you missed out on a case here. And sometimes compilers will tell you if there's a unreachable code block that you can remove, or a null reference, especially if you're working at CrowdStrike, null dereference, or a memory garbage collection issue. There's a huge number of things that are sometimes checked with static type checkers, compile time checks, runtime, memory management checkers with debug, and all sorts of tools exist. So if you ask an AI to write you some code, and it just writes some code based on code that other people have written, and eventually a code that other artificial intelligence tools have written, it may not learn from specific experiences. It may not know of the collaborators with whom you are working. It may not understand the particular bugs that you are working around. It may not understand the human interaction that will become essential. And I mentioned assistive technologies. Does your artificial intelligence understand how to write something that will be interacting with a visually challenged person, somebody with visual impairments, with audio, with oral impairments, understanding color contrast and things? You can automate some of that, but you're only going by past. There's no intuition. So as a collaborator, AI, good. As a replacement for learning, for gaining new skills and honing the ones you already have, maybe bad. I would say bad. So that brings us to how artificial intelligence shows up in our Innovate for Vegas Foundation projects and pursuits, and in general. We are not a software company. We are not a product-driven, for-profit company. We have no release schedules. And if we do deploy projects, we have a responsibility to our users to fix problems, but we are not motivated by market position or competition. We're not out to beat anyone. We're not out to be first to market with version 1 that kind of sucks, but we'll ship it anyway. We will not need to enter into the humane pin or rabbit R1 scenarios where we have egg on our face, or much worse, for trying to get out to impress investors and so on. So we're here to learn. We're here to elevate communities with civic volunteerism and open source projects, whether they are software or otherwise. We can use the tools at our disposal. There's a line. No one is expected to create their own canvas if you're a painter, but you might be expected. Hopefully, you expect of yourself to be able to mix your own paint colors, to clean your own brushes. Right? Some things are part of the process, and if you replace them with automation, you no longer have any idea what's happening. And by the way, this can also happen with so-called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. The replacement of humans in a process can go awry when the machine does its thing without you having any idea. And there's a Charlie Chaplin silent video that I will let you find that. Charlie Chaplin getting stuck in the works from a very long time ago. So we don't have these things. No one is going to say, we got to use AI to build this because we don't have time. We just won't release it now. We'll release it later. Part of our purpose does include, at least by implication, the potential for learning, for our contributors to our projects, our civic volunteers to develop job and life skills, including some of the most important, to be able to identify gaps and problems. If ChatGPT only builds something for you by you spending time on the prompt, it may give you exactly what you ask it for. But have you really asked it for the correct thing? Have you been able to identify gaps and problems that you are having it solve? Think about that. When you identify these gaps and problems, can you propose a solution? Can you design paths to achieving these solutions? Can you determine where bugs are and where they can be fixed? Either in your solution, that is, oh, we didn't think about this, or, oh, this doesn't really fix the problem. Let's iterate. Let's go back and rethink some of this. Or, of course, when you are building something, there may be a bug that you find at that point where the design can be fixed or improved through iteration. We it doesn't have to be code. Maybe you're baking a cake. So I usually go to cooking because it's something most people do. If you're cooking something and you've created your own recipe, you may think, this didn't taste quite right. Maybe I should add some more baking soda, make more baking powder. Maybe I should add some more salt, maybe some sugar, whatever it is. If you have developed the thing from scratch, as they say, you may have some insights into where to make some adjustments. If you follow the recipe and it doesn't come out right, this tastes weird. Where do you begin? Was my temperature in my oven wrong? Is the temperature controller in the oven wrong? Is it heating up too quickly? Is it not holding temperature? Is it fluctuating? Is it off by 10 degrees? Were my ingredients okay? I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother was making a cheesecake, a real cheesecake, cream cheese, eggs. Everything looked fine, but did it not turn out correctly? Turns out those eggs were not quite good. They were maybe sitting around too long at the store. So they weren't right. It turned, the cheesecake looked like a curdled mess after it was in the oven for a while. Just completely wrong. Had to start over. How would you even know to look? Because you've done this before. This is probably the problem. Oh, yep, it is. So you can determine where the bugs are and how you might be able to fix them. Whether it's a design problem, an implementation problem, or maybe it's some real world scenario that you didn't imagine. So you can improve it through iteration. Where can you learn? You may add something. This is when I was speaking about building computers earlier. You may know all there is to know about baking, and then someone says, I need some gluten-free. I can't have wheat flour. And you might say, yeah, but I always do my recipes with wheat flour. But put on your learning hat, because you're now going to try your recipe with almond flour or some other non-wheat flour, because you want the person with this dietary requirement to be able to enjoy your cooking. So you learn where collaboration can happen through communication cooperation. You will learn that as well. What can happen if you become too dependent on AI tools, we run the risk of being solo. If we automate prompt engineering, or if we automate through prompt engineering, both prompt engineering will be automated completely. You'll have some other AI that writes prompts for you. You don't really need to work with other people. You can work by yourself. Now, if you are using your large language model tools, your code assistants, your code developer in exactly that role as a co-pilot, to use a brand name, to write some test code for you, to do some early debugging, to figure out where you may have dropped a letter from a variable name. Hopefully you didn't. If you have two variables with the same name but for one letter and you mistyped, that can be a real challenge. Off by one errors, divide by zero, all these classics that you're supposed to look out for, but you sometimes just you're busy and you step over something that you didn't take a good look at, and so on. So automated tools can be doing those things for you in context as a real assistant. But if you are having artificial intelligence write code for you, these are false equivalents. These are the tools doing the work for you. You're not really learning. You're not really collaborating. You may not be really designing. You may not really be understanding the problem nor the solution. When it comes to fixing bugs, you may be left out completely. By the way, I don't know if the rules have been really solidified on this, but as you may know, if you use artificial intelligence tools to create something completely, artificial intelligence cannot hold copyrights or trademarks or be given credit for intellectual property, development, ownership. So that means who owns the rights to an open source project developed 100% entirely with open source? Nobody, or everybody. If you have an AI tool create your contribution to an open source project, you must list the AI tool as a co-contributor to your submission, to the part of the project on which you are working. And you must ask yourself if this limits or puts at risk the nature of the licensing for the tools and so on. It's also slightly disingenuous if you take credit for the work of others in the form of large language model generated code that you may not even understand yourself, or whatever it is, code or otherwise. So I myself am a fan of knowing what you are working on, using the tools. You're not expected to write your own compiler, or again, like I said, you're not expected to make your own paintbrushes, although you might eventually. You're not expected to make your own violin or piano if you're a musician. You're not expected to do a lot of things when it comes to tools, but when you replace your own skills, talents, development of your expertise by having the tools do your work for you, I think you're missing out, and you are also you're doing a disservice to your collaborators. I will end with a real story. This really happened. I was at an event. I think it was two people, a pair of people created a mobile application. I don't think it might have been a web app, but I believe it was a web app. I think it was a web app. Scan a QR code, check into an event, answer some survey questions. And it was having some problems, like real problems, failure notices or whatever it was. And I said, hey, it looks like something weird with when you supply an email address and this happens. And that one of the two people, both of them really, but the one person I spoke to said, oh, we use like a low code, no code thing to build this, so I don't even know how this works. I think that said it all. So I will leave it there. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation is about innovation, not about copy paste. Part of the process, part of the gift is the journey, as the saying goes. When you have artificial intelligence do the work for you, you're the product. No, but in all seriousness, part of the journey is important. The part where you learn, when you grow, when you learn how to collaborate with people, when you share ideas, when you make mistakes, and then you learn from them. You fix bugs, you understand how systems work, how they integrate, how they work with other systems. When you let your tools do that for you, you have learned nothing. And I think that's a loss. So on that note, don't forget to check out innovateforvegas.org. There's a link to our show, the current show, there at this present time. I've talked about this previously, that eventually, when priorities align correctly, we'll have a more functional or more utilitarian but also attractive version of our site with some more features. Ideally, it will be a sandbox where we can have some of our projects actually functioning as they might apply to a particular circumstance. You can visit our GitHub repositories in our GitHub organization. And by the way, because we're a nonprofit, we have our GitHub account with Teams features for a nonprofit for free. So thanks Microsoft and GitHub for that. So check that out. And there's a join discussion now. If you're interested in participating in our projects, you can visit our GitHub org to get started. We're very GitHub centric for program and project management and so on, initiative management. So have a GitHub user account to get started. See if you want to participate in our projects. From there, you are participating by listening to this audio program. And who knows, you can tell others about it as well. And one of these days, we'll have guests on again when it fits into the priorities. Thank you as always for listening, and take care at the end of July already.